Mom, we need to talk. Come to the living room. My son, Thomas, gestured with his chin, calling me into the living room. In the past, I would have scolded him for talking to me with that kind of disrespect. But now, I couldn't care less. Reluctantly, I did as I was told and stepped into the living room. Besides my son, his wife, Mary was also there. Her once timid attitude was completely gone, replaced by a sneering smile as she waited for me to sit down with them. So, what is it you want to talk about? It probably wasn't anything good. As soon as I sat down across from the couple, Mary spoke up as if she had been waiting and practicing for this moment. Mom, David called yesterday, and it sounds like they're having a baby. He and his wife are moving back soon. Oh, really? That's wonderful. So, David's going to be a father. I couldn't help but smile. My once emotionless grandson is finally going to become a father. When I heard he got married, I was truly happy for him, just like I would be for my own grandchild. So, David's going to be a dad? Does that mean it's time? Yes, it all started that day when my husband John passed away, and my relationship with my only son Thomas and his wife took a dark turn. The moment I had been waiting for had finally come. Unaware of my thoughts, Mary deepened her sneer and spoke as if it was the most natural thing to say. So, that's it, Mom. We're going to be living as a family now, so we don't need a maid anymore. It's time for you to leave. I never thought they'd say it first. I almost smiled, relieved that I wouldn't have to go through the trouble myself. Sure, that's fine. I have no reason to force myself to live with you anymore. They must have expected me to argue or get angry. Thomas and Mary were both stunned into silence by my calm surrender. Are you sure, Mom? Do you even have a place to stay after leaving here? No, I don't. But like I said earlier, I have no reason to keep forcing myself to live with you. I'll figure it out. You don't need to worry about me. I stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. My heart, despite my age, was filled with excitement. Finally, I was about to be free from this frustrating routine of life with them. Though my future seems very uncertain, I'm sure that I would figure it out. That's when it happened. Grandma doesn't need to leave. You two are the ones who should go. It's a nice day today, honey. Let me open the window. I gently opened the window, letting the calm spring sunlight pour in. Let me know if you get cold, I said to my bedridden husband, John. In response, he gave me a soft, playful smile. I'm really sorry for being such a burden. We promised not to say that, didn't we? Good grief. I couldn't help but chuckle at our usual banter, the kind you don't even hear in modern dramas anymore. The gentle spring breeze drifted into the room. Despite being bedridden, my husband's sense of humor always warms my heart. It must be children from the nearby school. Their laughter, carried by the spring breeze, reached our ears. My husband listened to the sound, smiling gently, as if watching something precious, but out of his reach. The sound of children is great. It inspires new ideas for toy designs. I'm sure you'll come up with something amazing again, knowing you, honey. This wasn't just flattery for John. As the president of a toy company, the toys he created weren't famous enough to be constantly featured in the media, but they were still loved by children for years. It was a heartfelt compliment because of his track record. Thank you, honey. Having you listen to me makes me the luckiest man in the world. Can I share one idea with you right now? You're exaggerating, really. I'm always here to listen to your ideas. I had already finished the chores that needed to be done today. So, I sat down on a chair beside his bed and opened the notes I had placed on the side table. What was written there were my clumsy sketches and notes. They were the rough drafts for new toys I had noted down after listening to my husband, since he couldn't do it himself. So, what kind of story are you going to tell me today? When I asked, he cleared his throat dramatically, just like a storyteller about to start a tale. All right then. How about this idea today? What he came up with was a toy concept, but but it was told like an exciting story. I listened, my heart racing like a child's, jotting down notes and checking them with him, and we both laughed together. In the uncertainty of home care. Taking care of my bedridden husband. In the midst of the depressing days, where one wrong move could lead to a mistake, these moments with him were my greatest solace. And that's the end of the story. By the way, isn't it about time that Thomas moves back? After finishing his story like always, his expression turned a bit darker than before. Thomas. That's the name of our only son, who moved out and headed for the city. Lately, we hadn't heard much from him, probably because he'd been busy, but he reached out recently for the first time in a while. And the news wasn't just casual. He told us that he had recently gotten married and had switched jobs to one near our hometown, wanting to move back in with us. I remember being quite surprised. At first, I was planning to politely decline. With John's care needs and having never met our daughter-in-law, living together seemed way too much. It was clear that it would increase the burden to everybody living under the same roof. But Mary, my wife, is fully aware of Dad's situation. We'll both help with his care and the housework while we're here. So please, Mom. That's what he told me. Honestly, managing our house, which is large enough for 3 people, all while taking care of my husband on my own, has been tough. Hiring a helper or a caregiver can be an option, considering we have enough savings. But I couldn't bring myself to let a stranger into our home, so I ended up doing everything on my own. My son's request made me feel both guilty and grateful. After talking it over with John, we decided to agree to the arrangement under those conditions. Even so, if he's gotten married, a casual visit or even a simple greeting to us wouldn't have been too much to ask, right? Kids these days are probably just like that. Plus, it's a bit of a trip from Thomas's place to here. That might be another reason of it. I tried to calm John down, but it seems the fact that Thomas got married without him knowing was a real shock. His face clearly showed that he's having a hard time accepting it. Even so, still. If you keep nagging too much, you might end up being disliked by Mary and Thomas. I said it as a joke and eventually he reluctantly accepted it. He didn't offer any more complaints after that. To be fair, he has a valid point. Back in our day, it is customary to visit and meet each other's family formally before even getting engaged. Earlier, I had told him that kids these days are like that, but part of me did feel that a call or even a message before getting married wouldn't be too much to ask. I'm sure Thomas and Mary had their reasons. Yes, they must have had their reasons. I kept telling myself that, trying to shake off the faint sense of unease that had sprouted. Little did I know, that uneasy feeling would become a hard reality. Before I knew it, the day Thomas and his wife were moving in has come. Their stuff had already arrived by delivery and had been brought in. Thomas reminded me about their arrival and it was about time for them to arrive. Hey, honey, everything looks okay? My husband, sitting in his wheelchair, asked me for the nth time. He insisted that he wanted to greet Thomas and Mary by the door, saying that first impressions are crucial. We already had a wheelchair prepared for his hospital visits, and after he became bedridden, we remodeled the house to be wheelchair accessible, so it wasn't much of a hassle. Dressing him in something nice instead of his usual easy care clothes was a bit of a challenge, though. You look great, as always. The same answer I had given him multiple times already. I wasn't saying it half-heartedly, I genuinely meant it. And as I had done many times before, I took out the small mirror and moved it around so he could see himself from every angle. He seemed reassured, smiling contentedly. But before long, his anxiety seemed to return. And just as he was about to ask again, "Mom. Dad. I'm home." The door unlocked and opened, followed by the familiar sound of my son's voice. Thomas appeared, looking a bit more grown-up than when he had left for the city. And behind him were 2 more figures. "Nice to meet you, Mom, Dad. I'm Mary, Thomas's wife. Sorry for the late introduction. This is our son, David. Thank you for agreeing with us living with you." Mary showed good manners. The boy standing next to her, David, just stood there quietly. Mary quickly prompted him to greet and say something, but honestly, I wasn't paying attention to that. What shocked us was the existence of a grandson we hadn't been told about, leaving us speechless. A son? Whose son? It must be their son. But David looks like he's already attending kindergarten or preschool. Even if he was born before they got married, isn't he a bit too old for that? They must have thought our silence was due to being upset over the lack of a proper introduction before the wedding or the sudden move-in announcement. Mary panicked, and it showed clearly that she's very uncomfortable about the situation. I am really sorry we couldn't visit and sit down with both of you earlier. But, as a divorced woman with a child, I was nervous about introducing myself to you, Mom and Dad. Oh. You have a child? So that means?
Yeah.
David was born from Mary's previous marriage. But I knew that when we got married, and David's happy to have a new dad, right? Thomas tried to put his arm around David as he said this, but the boy didn't respond, maybe because he was too nervous. No, it wasn't being nervous. He seemed like a doll. His dark eyes stared blankly into space, showing no emotion. If he were just nervous about moving into a stranger's house, his eyes would dart around or show hesitation. But David didn't show any of that. What could have happened to him? Now that I think about it, Mary did mention she was divorced. Could his previous father have treated him badly? No, I shouldn't jump to conclusions like that on the first day just because we're all going to live together. It's probably a very sensitive issue. Asking about it now won't do anyone any good. It might even strain our relationship going forward. I shook my head lightly to clear my thoughts. I see. I'm sorry, I thought it was just you and Thomas. But David, you're more than welcome here too. Right, honey. Huh? Oh, of course, David. As you can see, Grandpa can't move much, so I can't play catch or anything like that, but we can talk all you want. Feel free to come to my room anytime. It seemed he had snapped out of his shock. My husband also welcomed David with a smile. But even then, David quietly stared into space, as if nothing interests him. From that day, our life living with our son's family began. My husband and I tried to get closer to our new grandson, David, but it wasn't easy. As my first impression had suggested, he was like a life-sized doll. He would show up at mealtimes, and if you put food in front of him, he'd eat it. He handled his own basic needs, went to bed and woke up at the same time every day, and came out of his room. But he is closed off, not just to us, but also to his own parents, and everyone else. He wouldn't react to anyone. He wasn't just like a doll, he was more like a robot. What on earth could have happened to him? Actually, since then, I never got the chance to ask Mary about David. Of course, it's a delicate matter that I shouldn't bring up so easily, but more than that, Mary's behavior started to change. Not just Mary. Thomas's behavior also started to change. At first, as they promised, they were considerate of us, helping with John's care and doing chores around the house. But over time, they helped less and less, and now they don't do anything unless I ask. Honestly, if they just helped when asked, it wouldn't be so bad. At first, when I did ask, they would reluctantly help while making it clear that they didn't want to, sometimes even muttering complaints. And to make matters worse, not only do they not help around the house anymore, I've ended up being the one to take care of David's meals and take him to and from school. When relationships deteriorate this much, it's only natural for people to start looking at things with suspicion. Could it be that Mary is the problem? She said the reason she never introduced herself after their marriage was because being divorced with a child made her feel too uncomfortable and awkward. At the time, I accepted that explanation, but as her behavior has slowly worsened, I'm beginning to think there might be more to it. No, I shouldn't judge someone based on mere speculation. That's rude. I shook my head to rid myself of those negative thoughts. Even if Mary is showing her true colors, that doesn't necessarily mean it has anything to do with David's situation. I decided to separate both issues and focus on my chores for the day. The doubts that had surfaced when the idea of living together was first discussed and had gradually grown inside me finally came to a head in the worst way, at the worst possible time. After living with my son and his family for several years, my husband, John, finally left us. I can't say I didn't feel a certain relief from being freed of caregiving. However, the loss of my dear husband, who had kept his spirits up and lightened my gloomy days with his humor, was a devastating blow. It was such a huge loss that my memory of the days surrounding his death was hard to remember. I think I may have cried uncontrollably in front of my son and grandson. But I couldn't mourn my husband's death forever. I have to arrange the funeral, contact the relevant people, and take care of other logistics. Honestly, I had hoped that Thomas would help, but when I asked him, he plainly declined and dodged the responsibility. I felt uncomfortable asking Mary, since she wasn't blood-related, so I ended up handling everything on my own. A few days after the funeral, things got even worse. My son and his wife began living even more lazily than before. They began acting like it was only natural for me to take care of everything, meals, house chores, and looking after David. It was as if they were saying, "Dad's dead now, so there's nothing left for me to do." And that's exactly how it turned out. Hey, Mom. We did our part taking care of Dad. Isn't it only fair that we get more of his inheritance as compensation for that? Where did I go wrong in raising this man? My son's personality is rough, almost thuggish in his way of talking, as if he was collecting a debt, gave me a lot of stress and despair. Thomas and Mary only helped with John's care for the first few weeks after they moved in. After that, they won't even lift a finger unless I asked, and even then, they'd complain or do a really poor job. I don't want to give a penny of my husband's inheritance to people like that, even if one of them is my own child. Unfortunately for them, John left a clear will. I remember when Thomas and Mary had begun to break their promises, my husband commissioned an official will drafted with the help of a lawyer. The will stated that I would inherit 70% of everything and Thomas would get 30%. What are you talking about? It's all written in your father's will. You will get your share. But 30% is way too low. Mary and I helped take care of Dad too, so we should at least get 50%. Anything less isn't fair. How could he even justify it? I have no idea. I held back what I wanted to tell him and prepared to argue further. But we don't mind taking this to court to challenge the will. But how do you think David will feel about that? At the mention of David's name, I became completely powerless. Mary must have seen this as an opportunity because she pressed even further. Imagine how much it will hurt David, seeing his sweet grandma and beloved mom fighting. And if we take it to court and challenge the will, it's going to drag out in court for a long time. That means legal fees will pile up, and we probably won't be able to live a decent life. Poor David, he'll likely be hungry every day, all because his grandma was so stubborn. But I guess since he's not your real grandson, it doesn't matter to you, right? Mary pretended to cry, trying to guilt-trip me. If it were just these two infuriating people, I could have stood up to them. But with my poor grandson, who still had unhealed emotional wounds, I couldn't bring myself to hurt him any further. All right. We'll split your father's inheritance equally between me and Thomas. Happy now?
Yeah.
You should have just said that from the beginning, Mom. Thomas grinned smugly, satisfied. I had to fight the urge to slap that irritating smirk off his face. Yes, this is for David, for David's sake. I kept telling myself that, swallowing down my frustration. But that decision was a mistake. From that day on, Thomas and Mary started making all sorts of unreasonable demands. Whenever I refused, they would bring up David. Even though David isn't related to me by blood, he's still my beloved grandson. I couldn't let him suffer more emotional pain, so I had no choice but to give in to most of their demands. I told myself it was only until the right time comes. I kept repeating to myself that I just had to endure it until the time comes. How long did that hellish life last? David, who used to measure just around my waist, had grown taller than me, and even Thomas, and before I knew it, he already graduated from college and now is old enough to start his own family. Years after John's death, with Thomas and Mary using David as leverage to make unreasonable demands, had passed by in a blur of emptiness. That day was the same as always. My emotions were worn down and I just went about the chores as ordered by my son and his wife. It was during that time. "Mom, we need to talk. Come to the living room." Thomas poked his head into the hallway and jerked his chin to call me over. The old me would have scolded him for disrespectfully speaking to me that way. But after being manipulated and forced with David as leverage, I no longer have the energy to think that way. Reluctantly, I stepped into the living room as he had asked. In the living room, Mary was sitting waiting for us. The timid attitude Mary had shown when she first arrived at this house was long gone, replaced by a cruel, sneering smile, like an evil stepmother in a fairy tale, as she waits for me to sit down. "What is it you want to talk about?" I was sure it wouldn't be anything good. As soon as I sat down across from the couple, Mary eagerly started to speak. "Mom, David called yesterday, and it looks like they're having a baby. He and his wife are moving back to stay here for a while." "Oh, really? That's wonderful. So David is going to be a father." I couldn't help but smile. The grandson who once seemed like a robot, emotionless, is finally becoming a father. I was happy when I heard he got married, but it was heartbreaking that I couldn't attend the wedding because Thomas and Mary had prevented me from going. David is going to be a father. That means, it must be time. Yes, I recall the day John passed away, and my relationship with Thomas and Mary took a dark turn. The moment I had promised myself had finally come. Whether she knew my feelings or not, Mary deepened her malicious smile as she spoke. "So, Mom, we're going to be living as a family now, so we don't need you anymore. You can leave." Oh, I never thought they'd say it first. I had to fight to keep from smiling, relieved that I wouldn't have to deal with the hassle myself. "Sure, that's fine. There's no reason for me to force myself to live with you anymore." They probably expected me to argue or get angry. They were both stunned into silence by my calm acceptance. Oh, what a satisfying expression. Just seeing that made me feel a little better. "Are you sure, Mom? Do you even have a place to go after leaving here? Telling me to leave and then worrying about it, how twisted can this person be?" "No, I don't have anywhere to go. But like I said earlier, I no longer have a reason to live with you. David, your only leverage, has grown up and become independent. So, staying in this house is the last thing I want. I'll find a new place to live. You don't need to worry about me." I stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. My heart, despite my age, was filled with excitement. Finally, I was going to be free from this frustrating routine of a life. There was some uncertainty about my future, but I'm sure I'd figure it out. That's how it's been ever since I decided to care for John when he was still alive. That's when it happened. Grandma will not leave. The ones who should leave are you two, Dad and Mom. A resolute voice echoed through the living room. Instantly, everyone's eyes turned to the entrance. There stood David, who had apparently returned without anyone noticing. "David, when did you get back? And David, who do you think you're talking to, calling us you two? That's no way to talk to your parents." Mary couldn't hide her confusion at her son's sudden appearance, while Thomas masked his with anger. As for me, I could only stand there, trying to process the words David had just said. "I just got back, right when you two told Grandma to get out because she's useless. Like I said before, the ones who need to leave are you two. Parents. You're suddenly trying to act like parents when you've never done anything parent-like? Aren't you both embarrassed to even call yourselves parents?" Thomas couldn't find anything to say to that. Mary, stepping in for her speechless husband, fired back this time. "But David, she's not family. She's not related to you by blood. Why are you siding with her? Are you choosing her over your own mother?" Mary started fake crying again, just like when she used to threaten me. But it didn't work on David. Now you're saying blood is thicker than water? Honestly, it's embarrassing, coming from my own parents. Like I said, did you ever do anything for me as parents? Did you ever play with me on your days off, shared some funny stories, cook and prepared me a warm meal? Where were you when I feel lonely? Now it was Mary who was at a loss for words. David pressed on, not giving them a chance to recover. No, you never did anything. You are my mother, my biological mother, but you always leave me alone to go out and have fun with Dad. But Grandma and Grandpa were different. They took good care of me, they made sure I will never feel hungry. Even though Grandpa was bedridden, he always gives me time to talk and share about funny stories, always talked excitedly about the toys he developed. I will admit, they're not even real family to me, but they treated me like their real grandson. I'm not stupid, picking a side between you and Dad against Grandma. I think it's pretty clear who I'm going to side with, the parents who did nothing for me or the grandparents who treated me with kindness. But David, if you've still got something to say, how about we settle it in court? I'm guessing you'll run out of money first, though. So, what's it going to be? With David's firm stance, Thomas and Mary had no choice but to reluctantly nod in agreement. A few days later, as David and his wife moved in, Thomas and Mary moved out of the house for good. Now, it would have been nice if everything ended happily with David becoming a father, but things didn't go that smoothly. A few days after Thomas and Mary moved out, it seemed the consequences of their reliance on me caught up to them, and Thomas and his wife started causing trouble. Specifically, they tried to make a scene and loitered in front of the house. David was at work, and I was out shopping, leaving David's pregnant wife home alone. She must have been terribly frightened of her in-laws. Fortunately, the troublesome couple was soon arrested after a neighbor called the police, and they ended up with a criminal record. I was extremely worried about how the incident would affect David's wife and her unborn baby. Honestly, I had no idea what would have happened if they weren't arrested that time. Thankfully, everything went smoothly, and David's wife didn't suffer anxiety and safely birthed their child. Despite the fear my son caused her, she, like David, continued to treat me like a real grandmother after that incident. That, to me, was just as joyful as the birth of my great-grandchild. One day, as David gazed at his peacefully sleeping child, he said this. When I look at this child, I think of Grandpa. Grandpa? I didn't mean to sound rude, but naturally, my husband and his great-grandchild looked nothing alike. So, why did he think that? Yeah, I want to make lots of fun and cool toys, just like Grandpa did, both for my own child and for the kids that grew up similar like me, who don't have anything to look forward to every day. No, it's not just that I want to, I will make toys like Grandpa did. I'll definitely do it. Seeing my grandson so determined reminded me of John in his younger days. This is how people's hopes and dreams are passed down. Blood ties don't matter. Once again, I reflected on what David had said that day.